for me. This is just for me.
And me.
And everybody, probably. Stephen, will you...
Okay, you know the audiobooks? Neither reader for the audiobooks, this is 2 for the series, ever contacted me regarding pronunciation. So they're all over the place.
Here we go.
Right, let's get it right.
Okay, how do you say this?
Kachin Chamal.
I think we all got that one. But we were all afraid, weren't we? We didn't want to say it out loud. What about this one?
Kachin Naruk.
No one's ever said that out loud.
I barely recognized it actually.
Okay, I think we all know how to do this, but let's get confirmation.
Talana Mass.
This one's bothered me for ages. Do that one for me.
Mibe.
Oh, okay.
I've been saying maybe for ages. Maybe she will. And last one, just do that one for me.
Ontos Falak.
Now you have it.
But no, you're missing a ton of
I'm missing a ton of them.
Thais Andy. Thais Andy.
I didn't want to touch it.
Thais the Dur.
I didn't want to touch it. I'm not messing. I thought I'd be the only one who didn't know.
Any others? Throw them out.
Throw them out.
I'm great with Jagged.
Jagud.
Cool.
Which?
Darajista.
Krupp. Yeah, not Kruppe.
I'm the
Krupp.
crook for ages.
He was one of the characters in Cam was running the game, so I rolled up the character of Krupp.
Did you just speak crap the entire time?
Yeah, in the third person. It was awesome. It was great.
I only sounded Darajistan after listening
Darujistan?
to the Darajistan, yeah.
Darujistan.
After listening to the books on the audio.
That's awful.
That's one I couldn't say for years.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I'd say if somebody asked me what these books is about at this stage, like, where are they? I don't know.
Yeah.
Who's he? That's the level we're at now. I'm glad. Listen, when you all go home, he's coming home with me. He's just going to answer questions. That's the way it's going to be. Right. So what we're going to do is anybody who has questions, stick their hand up. That's probably like two people, really. 2,
I'll get
6. Okay. So what we'll do is I'm going to point at you. Okay. So you're in the corner. Let's go. You first.
Just out of curiosity, you said that most of the characters were played through games.
Mhm.
I was wondering if that was concurrently or sequentially, because I've been involved in games where the same characters inhabited the same timelines, but in both situations. So I'm just wondering, were you kind of taking 3 weeks playing one set, 3 weeks playing the other? And working
No, we
forward through the timeline that
alternated. We would alternate who ran the game that night.
way? Right.
And so, but sometimes we would play both sides. So, for example, in Darujistan, Cam came up with the city. He mapped the city and all the rest. And I was playing. I was playing Krupp, Ralaknom. Crocus didn't exist. Crocus is for the novel only. So Krupp, Ralaknom, Murillo, and Cam's NPCs were Cole, Baruch, the alchemist, Vorkin, people like that. And then we blended the story because I was running the game where he had, maybe he was running. We ended up. Let's think about this. Because what we did was we converged 3 campaigns. We were doing Whiskey Jack, Fiddler and Hedge. Fiddler and Hedge, Quick Ben, and Kalam. And we would actually split the squad. So some games he was running that campaign, at other times. And I think my characters were Quick Ben, Kalam, and Fiddler. And he had the other ones. And then my first character ever rolled up was Anamander Rake. And then we just blended him into the whole storyline. And we played out the fete at the end of Gardens of the Moon. That was actually gamed out. And but normally later on, we moved from sort of one-on-one gaming, which I know sounds strange, but where I had a whole group of people, and then I ran them through sequentially, or not sequentially. I ran them through in a linear fashion, the full timeline. The poor guy. I did a one-on-one game with a guy named Mark Paxton McRae, And he rolled up his character. He gave the name to me as Karsa Orlan. And then I sat down and put together a campaign for him. And the poor man, he had no idea what was coming. I said, okay, you're living in a tribe in the mountains, and a couple of your friends come up to you, and one of them says, all right, it's time to go down to the valley and kill children. And the thing was, Mark had no idea that I turned his character into Teblor, into a Toglatai. So children, of course, is just short adult people. But he didn't know he was a giant. So he went through this horrible existential crisis. Coming down the mountain. So, what is happening here? So yeah, every now and then, you mess with the heads of people. I mean, if you're running a game, that's the most fun of all.
Okay, hands up for the next question. Lady in front.
Thank you. When I was reading, there was the concept of hot iron and cold iron for personalities. And I was wondering, did you invent it or did you take it from somewhere? Because I googled it and I couldn't find it anywhere. Like, nobody knows it unless they read the friggin' book. I want to use it in conversations and I can't.
It does work when you think about it. When I read it, I was like dividing all my friends into those categories.
Yeah, invented on the fly, actually. Yeah.
Wow.
Next up, you at the back there. That's you.
Yay. You said there about like creating the character on characters, and did you relish in the kind of moralistic dilemmas you see in your characters?
And most of our gaming was just that, to actually create a moral quandary in the players and really mess with their heads.
Yeah. So when you wrote kind of like, Whiskey Jack taking the fall for Amanda Wright with all the women in that scene.
No, that was fiction. That was not gaming.
Did you deliberately go in saying, I want to make people feel a certain way, or did it just happen along the way and it was the most logical course?
There are fantasy writers out there who, when they kill characters in their books, leave you wondering whether they killed them for the purposes of boredom on their part, or the desire to create a new story. But for this writing and for the Malazan stuff, if I'm going to kill a major character, I want you to feel it. There has to be an emotional context to it. And then in order for that to be authentic, I have to feel it first. And if I don't, then I fail at my task.
Cold time.
Yes.
Hands up. Let's go right at the back and we'll work our way forward.
Sure.
Literally, you're at the door. I feel bad for you.
At the door. So a lot of authors will say that they have what ifs for what founds their series. Is there a Malazan what if? And if so, what is it?
For what defines the series?
Yeah, like, what if this happened? Like, is there a what if for the Malazan series? And if so,
In terms of the world building and the story?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What if you could create a world and a civilization where sexism does not exist? And then, as anthropologists, we said, well, how can you get to that point? Well, fantasy is all about magic. So if magic is accessible to all on the basis of merit, discipline, study, and all the rest, you cannot have a gender-based hierarchy of power because it can never be maintained. And so it was a world without sexism. But then we couldn't signpost that because every character in that world doesn't think in those terms. So they wouldn't be, saying, speaking on behalf of patriarchy or whatever. It's all about access to power. And so that was kind of the big what ifs for the series. And oddly enough, I think it wasn't until somebody wrote a review by the third book, Memories of Ice, where they actually noticed. Because it's not present. It's significant by its absence. And that's why you have female characters running all the way through in all levels of power. Good question.
Thanks.
Second last at the back again. Yeah.
Hello. I know you haven't read them, but which one is your favourite book in the series?
Okay.
And why?
I guess I would define that three ways. To me, the most satisfying to write of the books was Dead House Gates. Because, bear in mind, it took me 8 years to find a publisher for Gardens of the Moon. So everything was held in check. And, that 8 years was not me constantly flogging the manuscript. It went out once, it stayed with a publisher in the States for 2 years before it showed up in the mail. And this is long before electronic stuff, so it's the actual copy shows up in the mail. And then 18 months at another U.S. publisher, at which point I shelved it. I just put it away. So then I ended up living in the UK, and I sell Gardens of the Moon. And it was like, here I had this editor just coming out of nowhere who had faith in what I was doing. And it just sort of unleashed me at that point. So I was working at Toyota head office in Red Hill in Surrey. And I had a Scion MX-5. Do you guys know what that is? Yeah? It was a little word processor, a little monochrome word processor. Not much bigger than this. And I wrote Dead House Gates on it. And I wrote it in my lunch breaks. And then when I came home from work, I lived in Dorking, and I stopped off at Cafe Rouge, and I would write for a couple of hours, and then end up heading home. And it felt complete as a book. It did everything I wanted it to do. And I would write the music, and quite often the main soundtrack was Black Hawk Down, because you can do that whole final scene from the wall of Aaron. Everything in that can be done in silence to leave no man behind in Black Hawk Down. And I used to play that while I was writing it. So it just ran through my head. This is symphonic piece. So that's one of them. Midnight Tides wrote itself. It just came out. I invented to hole on the roof that he was standing on. And then I thought, well, maybe I should describe what he's wearing. And I thought, he's not wearing anything. He's wearing a blanket. And he just sort of came out from nowhere. So that was the most effortless writing. But for me, the greatest impact for me in the series is Toll the Hounds. And that was, my father was dying at the time, so the entire novel is a delving into the nature of grief and working through that grief. And also, it's the cipher for the series, because the point of view, the voice, this is the first, or the only one of the entire 10-book series where you know the voice that's driving the narrative is Krupp. And so he's a kind of self-conscious narrator, so it's metafictional. And that is actually the cipher to an alternate reading of the entire series as being metafictional. So Toll the Hounds, I think, is probably the one that stands out the most for me.
Put your hands up.
Oh, more questions now.
More. Everybody's getting brave now. We're all getting brave. Okay, let's go right beside the bar with the blue arm. That's you.
He's napping.
That's you. He's napping.
Yeah. Clearly napping. As an author, you have never shied away from using the fantasy world to comment on contemporary issues like colonialism or capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have published a prologue for The God Is Not Willing already, and it feels like it's going to touch on another contemporary issue, which is like climate change. And
Mm-hmm.
is this something you're going to pursue further? And is this something you want to explore in your writing?
I don't think I'm going to go very heavily into climate change as a human-generated event. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind it is, and we've been changing the climate since the Neolithic. But I don't know how I would answer that. I mean, every novel is a dialogue with the world around, the real world, during the time it was written. But the style I'm approaching with the Carson trilogy is much closer to Gardens of the Moon than it is to the later books of the series. So it rips along fairly fast. so I